I'm going to introduce our moderator and our three speakers for the second panel of the weekend, which is on activism and presenting science information in the face of pseudoscience. First on the panel, based in California, Susan Gerbic heads up the infamous guerrilla skeptics on Wikipedia. She also catches out so-called psychics in her sting operations, which have been reported on in the New York Times, Skeptical Inquirer, and the Australian Skeptics magazine. Now on to our next speaker. With graduate degrees in synthetic organic chemistry and science education and an extensive career as a high school science teacher, Dave Farina, also known as Professor Dave, is well equipped to educate the public, and he does so with gusto via his popular chemistry and science-themed YouTube videos. Founder of next speaker, founder of MetaFact, whose mission is to connect people with trusted evidence on questions that impact their lives, societies, and the world around them. Ben McNeil is based at the University of New South Wales Climate Change Research Centre, where he has had a lengthy academic career as an oceanographer. And lastly, chairing our panel today is Tim Mendham, Executive Officer of the Australian Skeptics Inc. and editor of our journal, The Skeptic. Tim is an experienced journalist and editor, contributing as a freelancer for a wide range of publications, including the Australian Financial Review, MIS Magazine, and Computer World Australia. Tim, I will hand over to you to run the show.
Thank you very much. You okay with this? Okay. Hi there. It's great to have you here. It's nice to see all these people from around the world, actually. Well, from Sydney anyway, and from California. One thing that binds us all together, despite the different locations, is that we all want to present the truth of what is true and science against pseudoscience. And even though we might have a scientific or a journalistic or whatever background that we have, it's that same aim. We just use different medium and different formats. Okay, so to cover those aspects and to actually look at what might be the case of how everyone approaches that particular aim, I'd just like to ask each of our panelists here to just briefly describe what it is they do in this sense of activism. We'll get into some of the specifics later on, but this is just sort of the overview. So if I can ask Susan first of all. Susan, would you like to describe what you do in guerrilla skepticism?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here. I cannot wait to be able to come back to New Zealand and Australia to hang with you guys in person. So just thank you. I've been having a really great time in the weekend. So I manage a Wikipedia team that is about 120 people. Some of them are more active than others, obviously. And what we do is I set up the training. The training is all based on stuff that I wish I had known whenever I was learning how to edit Wikipedia. We are located in a secret cabal on Facebook, and we are working on improving, writing, maintaining, everything you can think of that has to do with Wikipedia pages concerning science, scientific skepticism, people of science, and pseudoscience. And we're doing this in all languages we possibly can. So the work we produce, probably 45% of all the work we produce is in languages other than English. And we're really proud of that fact to be able to do that, because I don't think many other organizations think outside of the English language, or they're monolingual. So we take about 2 to 4 months to train somebody from beginning to end. They're placed in our secret cabal, and that way they're mentored with other experienced editors and other beginning editors. We're aimed at, obviously the average reader, because we know Wikipedia is such a huge place for people to get their information. But one of the niches we're trying to fill is that when the media is trying to come to look for something, and we know the media is really rushed off their feet. They just don't have the time to be able to do in-depth articles and research on things, especially science writers. I know here in America, we've really they've cut back on science writers for journalists. And so we want to make sure that when they're getting information on a subject like cupping, which was huge in 2016 when the Olympics came out and the swimmers started showing up with those big hickeys all over their body, the Wikipedia page views went nuts for the cupping Wikipedia page. We hadn't known about that in advance. This is 2016. We weren't as focused on then. So it was a rush to get information onto the Wikipedia page to make sure it was scientifically accurate. as well as to get our experts on the page mentioned that we knew that would give a scientific, a good answer to what cupping really was. So we know that the media is quoting us. We find we find journals, articles, and so on that have definitely taken the information from the Wikipedia page directly. And so we need to make sure that when they're going to the Wikipedia pages, they're getting great information. The rules of Wikipedia are the rules of scientific skepticism. There's no doubt of that. It is a skeptic site. Whether the editors there identify themselves as skeptics or not, it is a skeptical tool. My personal mission is to improve not only the Wikipedia pages and to bust the psychics and get facilitated communication outside of get it out of our universities from being taught there, but is to bring armchair skeptics into the fold and to rebuild our community or build our community so that we can become, a bigger, better world where people who want to do more, they can. We'll mentor them, we'll train them, we'll get them going and everything we need to do to get them to become more active in the community. So I'll end with just this little bit. I know you guys all like data and statistics. So we have written, as of today, 1,912 pages, Wikipedia pages. 45% are in languages outside of English. We only consider a page, we call it ours. Of course, it's not really ours, but it has to be a page we've really written from beginning to end. We don't write stubs. The page we just wrote was an Afrikaans Wikipedia page for Crohn's disease, and that didn't exist before this. We do track our Wikipedia pages, and that 1,912 pages have been viewed 102 million times, 102, 136, and 62 times. We've written 102 vaccine-related Wikipedia pages that have been viewed 4.5 million times. And we've written 67 pages on Australia, different people in Australia or organizations in Australia. 36 focused on New Zealand. And just for my last example is Susie Wiles. She had a Wikipedia page from 2016 to 2020. It had 6-7 citations on it. It was okay. I mean, it had a photo and it was okay. But we rewrote the Wikipedia page and we made it live in February of 2020. And it now has 44 citations on it, multiple pictures. It talks about her experience, her degree, all the stuff that she does. And bam, you remember what happened in 2020. So March of 2020, her Wikipedia stats went crazy. So she was normally getting 7 page views a day. Now she's averaging 144 page views a day. And since we created that Wikipedia page, it's been viewed 77,000 times. Whereas before, I think it had like 9,000 page views over 3 years. So we got in right in time so that the media had somebody to be able to go, oh, she looks great. Look at this. Look at her experience. Boom, let's get her on TV. So it was just like a really nice little, oomph. So that's me.
You. Okay. Thank you, Susan. So I can move on to Dave, actually, Dave Farina. I think you're okay. Thank you. I know it's referred to as Professor Dave Explains, but I know that you're actually not a professor, are you? I think. Could you describe what you do?
Yeah, well, I used to teach organic chemistry at a trade university around like 2010 to 2013. And I started a YouTube channel in 2015, and I wanted to make educational content. So the first content that I put up was simply my organic chemistry lectures from when I was teaching. So I just had a whiteboard, delivered them to camera, just precisely as I had done with my students, and that received a lot of praise. People were appreciative of those tutorials, and so I started to do more and more academic content. I really wanted to cover a wide variety of subjects, and initially from 2015 to about 2019, all of my content was just very academically aligned, really just for students, studying biology, physics, math, just to help them with their classes and their exams. And then in 2019, I sort of got dragged into the debunking world vis-a-vis a skirmish with some flat earthers. And I began to be very fascinated with the world of pseudoscience. That wasn't really, I had always been interested in pseudoscience and public science literacy and things of that nature, but I had never really taken a dive into that pool myself. But through this interaction with the flat earthers, I started to become more and more fascinated with misinformation, hoaxes, charlatans, why people fall for it, the sociological reasons, and so forth. And so I made a bunch of flat Earth debunks, which got a lot of views. So that really encouraged me to continue with that. But then I quickly branched into some other things like young Earth creationism, alternate cosmologies, anti-vaxxers, COVID denial, things that are more topical. And so my approach really is that I really want to encourage people to get that basic public science literacy that is going to immunize themselves from pseudoscience, from charlatans, because let's face it, 80 to 90% of the pseudoscience out there, if you have a working knowledge of high school level physics, biology, and chemistry, you won't fall for it. And that is what I try to offer with my academic content. But I quickly realized that more aggressive action needs to be taken in many cases. And so I try to make debunking content that is, kind of razor sharp, very succinct. Just, this is the con man. This, so like an Andrew Wakefield type of persona. These are the lies he tells. Here's how we know they are lies. Here's the background on, their con and everything. And try to really just lay it out as clearly, as briefly as possible. This is not true. And I find that it is pretty accessible content. People do watch it, and I think some can be swayed by it, or at least that's the goal anyway. And then I try to perpetually encourage in that content. I try to filter people over to my academic content by sort of saying, recently I had a bit of a skirmish with a creationist chemist and an apologist about origin of life research, and I had to use very involved chemistry to explain his lies and things like that. So I continually kind of say, look, if this doesn't make sense, please go to this tutorial, my organic chemistry tutorial that explains this concept. It's all here for you. It's not something that I can just get across to a layperson in 5 minutes. Unfortunately, I wish that were the case. I wish science was so simple that I could explain a bachelor's degree level of knowledge in any scientific field in 3 minutes. But unfortunately, that's not the case. But I try to meet people where they are. Say that this person is lying. Here's how we know. Here are some basic scientific facts. And then encourage them to sort of take that next step on their own, whether it be through my academic content or textbooks or taking classes or whatever it may be. I'm really passionate about trying to inspire people to just get that very basic knowledge, high school level science understanding for themselves. So yeah, that's what I do. YouTube.
Okay, thanks, Dave. If I can move on to Ben. Now, it's nice to see Ben actually in the building. I think Ben was anticipating being in his car at one stage on the cricket pitch from doing coaching.
I was, yeah. My son does cricket, so I coach his cricket team. So it's actually rained out here in Sydney. So
that's right.
I'm actually in my office. It's fine.
and for those who don't know, the overseas people, cricket is, of course, the game that's played in heaven. So, so Ben, if I could ask you just to describe Metafact and how you started that.
Well, thanks for the invite, Tim, and it's great to meet Dave and Susan and everyone else. So my background's in climate science. So I've been since the late 90s deep in climate research in academia. And it's, as many of you would know, over the last 20 years or 30 odd years, it's been a bit of a ride in terms of shifting opinion on this isn't a big global conspiracy. There's real science behind this thing called climate change. But I guess when was this? Around sort of the mid 2015. I was thinking, I've always been passionate about science itself and the method and how that extracts the truth in the truest possible way. That is, there is no real truth. It's obviously there's uncertainty in everything, but it's the best way to reach that endpoint of what we call truth. But how do people access that? And so I guess we came up with this idea that why don't we just democratize that method, whereby anyone can ask a question, and then if we build the infrastructure to allow authentic experts to be independent experts in their field to be verified and then answer those questions like a peer review process, and do it whereby there's not just one or two, we can get hundreds of experts in a given field to answer in their own way, then we can actually extract a scientific consensus. So in sort of a way, I don't know if many people understand what meta-science is, but meta-science is where you bring in many different research studies on a given topic or question. And then there's at the end, because there's independent approaches to that particular topic or question at hand, it's a much more powerful way to actually find out what the evidence is at the end. So instead of just one scientist coming in and talking about climate change like I did for many years, well, we could have the thousands that are behind me that don't sort of share a voice, and maybe they don't want to, and they can actually be part of this process of science communication. So MetaFact was built on that premise of allowing the anyone to openly access and engage with or verified experts, and really the communication, at least of the scientific method, and allowing them to really get a 360-degree perspective on any given question, because as many would know, there is no binary in science. There is no true false. There's a pendulum of where we are. It's about risk and uncertainty, as Heisenberg said. So everyone should know where that risk is. So obviously, if you're thinking about pseudoscience, there's not much evidence out there for many different things. So I think of it like scaffolding. I'm not sure who shared this, but knowledge is like a big scaffold, and pseudoscience is on has shaky grounds. But then there's other areas of science which have huge amounts of research and are really on solid foundations. But people don't know that. It's hard for people just generally in the world to understand where this knowledge infrastructure has been built. So we want to try and help that. There's a lot of challenges that we launched a couple of years ago. I think Tim and I, we've talked about it quite a bit. There's a lot of challenges. Facts are boring. And I think COVID really, I learned so much. I mean, I overcame this, and we started before, I guess, around Trump when he got elected. And then, I come from a climate background, but COVID has I'm gobsmacked at what's happened in terms of just misinformation. And your point before, Dave, about I guess the ability for anyone to share and have an immense voice, huge voice, when they really don't have perspective or don't have the ability to say that they have a really great narrative. I don't know if you remember in COVID early on, there was heaps of these Medium articles or other articles that were sharing by just these sort of San Fran, techno guys who really had a fantastic narrative of how they explain things, but they had no background in epidemiology or anything beyond, their startup really, but they had huge voice and huge audiences. So it was frustrating from that perspective. I think that's we can talk about this more, Tim, in terms of the weaponization and how social media and other technologies obviously help that, and I think we know that. But I think at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity as well to do the opposite. If we build like what Susan's doing with her work as well, there's a lot of grounds to build up this infrastructure. And over time, as you're seeing Google and the algorithms, they want truth as well. They want trust as well. So when you do build up infrastructure and they go, actually, you guys are onto something that's sort of more authentic, I think a lot of the other stuff will get filtered out in many ways. The stuff that needs to be filtered out, in my opinion. So I think there's some grounds for if you build up the infrastructure of allowing for really question everything and the scientific method, and also the ability for evidence to be heard on all sides. That's I think that's going to work in the long run. But that's me. So MetaFact is from my perspective, our mission is to really help people find help people find more trusted truth on the web. That's what we want to do, and mobilize experts rather than let them just sit behind closed doors. So that's me.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Yeah, I mean, it's been stated that a lot of people, especially younger scientists, don't like coming forward to explain, say, COVID, etc., their understanding, because they're going to get hit very quickly by the anti people. Then what you said there about pseudoscience hanging off the scaffolding, if you like, I always if the image that I get from that is like pseudoscience is rattling the scaffolding back and forth, trying to bring the whole thing crashing down. So they're all at the same level then, the science and the pseudoscience. So I think that's very sad. On the point you made about democratization, and I think this is actually important for all three speakers, because you're coming from different ways of presenting scientific information. Through MetaFact, it's a panel, right? And whether you call it a consensus or not, the panelists sort of put a vote in as to how accurate a particular claim is, or a particular bit of information, or how reliable it is. And you can go from 100% and you end up with all of the panel agreeing that this is 100% correct, or some goes further down and saying dubious or whatever. Susan, of course, you put up your information on Wikipedia, where it's, to a certain extent, it is peer reviewed. It's sort of, people look at it and comment on it, and they can change it, right? Yep. And they do that as well. So, and Dave, with yours, I mean, you said you're presenting the truth, right? And yours is the most personalized presentation of this sort of information. It's you out there and saying this is the case. It's a lecture in a way. So, and therefore I'm interested from that. Can I just go back to Ben? The concept of consensus of information, whether it's through Wikipedia or whether it's Dave on his own, is a vexed term in climate change areas. With a 98, 99, whatever % of scientists have a consensus. And I don't like the consensus. I use the word agree. And agree doesn't get the same sort of argument as consensus. People say consensus, scientists don't vote, and they don't. But they do agree on things. Can I just ask you, from your panel?
I don't like the word consensus either, but I'm not sure another word, to be honest. So, I mean, I guess it's really, like, you take the 97%, 98%, I guess the idea of it has been powerful. I remember when that came out from, the piece of work came out, 10 years ago on that, in terms of just polling, do you agree that climate change is caused by human activities and X, Y, Z? And I remember, I think at the time, thinking, okay, let's see how that goes. And I think if I'm wrong, Dan will correct me. A friend of mine, Obama has actually cited that. So I think we get to, whether it's consensus or agree or whatever that term is. Consensus sounds political. That's what I don't like about it. It's not scientific. But whatever that term is, I mean, it gets through to the people who really do influence, and that's powerful. I guess from my perspective, I like calling it expert consensus, but I don't know if that helps. If anyone has other terms, let me know, because I'm better ways to communicate this. But I think there is something about, from our perspective, I'm an inquisitive by nature, and I don't. I want to know all sides as well of the debate within someone who's actually has their expertise, if there is a debate. And there are huge debates out there, and I had no perspective on some of them. And I guess we're not focusing too much on the conspiracy side of things, like the real crazy things. We're sort of more focusing on the ones that people will Google search, like, should I get a mammogram every year? Should I test? Should that? All those really nuanced health science-based questions that Google can send you a lot of crap, right? As we know, we want to try and focus on the ones that are really going to help people get a better perspective. So the consensus we find, although we haven't done a huge amount of work on polling how they think yet, because we're still extremely small, but we would hope to think that they can come in and get a collective view of all the evidence, and that helps them as they go and talk to, let's say, their doctor or whoever it may be. So yeah,
Okay.
that's from our perspective, from the consensus side. I'd love to hear others.
I mean, sort of all the people on this panel are sort of activists in one way or another.
Yeah,
that they're just presenting information in different ways. I'll get to Susan in a second, but I want to go to the other extreme, if I can call it the other extreme, to Dave, right? Where you're standing there in a video presenting information on a huge range of topics, right? And it's you doing it. How do you feel that stands up in presenting science as, a personalized view, backed as it is by scientific information?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be effective. I mean, I what I try to do is lean on what I perceive as a talent for breaking down complex information in very simple and succinct ways. I think that's a skill I have, and that's why my academic content does very well, because, I didn't understand my OChem teacher, but in this video I understand. So, that kind of a thing. So I try to apply that to these topics, whether it's vaccines or whatever. Just take those lies that are out there and break them down, and compare them to very basic scientific knowledge. But even more so than just presenting information, what I also like to try to do is deconstruct the anatomy of the worldview of the science denier to them. So I kind of go, you have a bias for anti-establishment narratives. Here's how we know this, right? This person is not credible, but they just fed you this anti-establishment narrative. It hits your bias, so you believe them with no scrutiny. You do not scrutinize them in the way you scrutinize other sources, things like that. And here is the terminology that's being misused. Here's the definition of this term. Here's a false analogy that they're using, right? So I try to not just like, I don't want it to be, they say one thing and then I say another thing. Who should I trust? That obviously you can get into trouble pretty quickly. I want to show people not just the information, but exactly why it is that they are receptive to these false narratives. And I think that obviously the most conspiratorial people, it's just going to go in one ear and out the other, and there's just not too much you can do about that. But I think that people who are a little bit confused and they find these compelling narratives that are anti-science on the internet, they just need a voice of reason somewhere to show them the other side and go, oh, man, I almost fell for that. I get so many comments that are just, wow, I almost fell for that. But you explained it in such a way that I can see now that this is a con man. They are lying for financial gain. You couldn't have put it more clearly. I will not listen to that person anymore, So unfortunately, there's thousands and thousands of such people to deconstruct, and I'm trying my best, but I do really try to target these toxic individuals and explain beyond a shadow of a doubt why they should be disregarded.
Is that a lonely profession?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, lonely and yet drenched in this cacophony of trolls on the internet. I mean, it's just become my life. Hours a day of just comments.
Well, yeah, you're not alone. That's
No.
Obviously there's tens of thousands of scientists like you. I mean, not as maybe as profile, but the same. When they talk, they get there's a lot of trolling, a lot of hate. So. Yeah, look, we're all I agree with what you're doing is great. We need that the narratives I've realized are so important. I just had that ideally belief that you'd share facts and people would say kumbaya and let's dance, right? But it doesn't work that way. You need a really powerful narrative, and that's one of the challenges with us at MetaFact. All scientists, they're very nerdy, right? They don't really know how to narrate. So we've got editors now to try and make it a bit more salient to people. So just want to say well done on that front, Dave.
I've always thought that, and I've met many scientists in my career, and I thought most of them I would not put in front of a camera. Right? Honestly, I wouldn't actually put them in front of people half the time. But I mean, it's often the case where non-scientists can actually come in.
Well, that's a compliment. Thanks, Tim. That's a time. That's
really great. Can I move over to Susan now? I'm sort of on that same topic. I mean, in a way, Susan sort of, not so much with the other activities that you do, where you got a very high profile, but in the Wikipedia, you yourself is sort of hidden behind the editing, in a way, of actually editing Wikipedia page or writing Wikipedia pages. I mean, it's the other people on Wikipedia, the editors and things, who might know you, but the ordinary public doesn't see you, and therefore you're in the middle. Do you get abuse on Wikipedia pages, or do you get, personally? Or...
No, not really. You have to remember, I train. I'm a recruiter. I do all the training. So I've only, I think, written 50 pages, 52 pages or something like that. I think I only have like 5 million page views or something like that. But my team has 102 million page views as a team. And so that's what is, I could go out and do it myself and edit Wikipedia every day and do those kinds of things. Or I can have a bigger effect by recruiting and training and maintaining and motivating and kicking some people in the what to get them to, to get something finished. I'm just mainly a manager of cats. But going to the consensus you were talking about is that Wikipedia doesn't use primary sources necessarily. We only are allowed to use secondary sources from notable places, from notable people, from peer-reviewed information. For example, this amazing project that Richard Saunders has just finished. That is phenomenal. In the past, I mean, of course, all of us skeptics were able to say, well, duh, psychics are not accurate. Duh, we've always been able to say that. But until Richard has finished this and put this on Skeptic magazine, the Australian Skeptic magazine, and it's printed in a place where it's has some journalistic integrity, we haven't been able to say that. Can you believe that it's been all this time before somebody is crazy enough like Richard Saunders to do something absolutely insane, put thousands of hours of time in something like that? And we can't necessarily put that on a Wikipedia page about psychics. But what's going to happen is after this is published, then other people who are experts in the field of the paranormal will be able to do in the media, notable media, will be able to write about what he's done, and they'll be able to create more content and citations about it, and people who will come out of and say, oh, I've looked at all the work that Richard Saunders done. He's made it all open, and according to then we will be able to use that information on Wikipedia pages concerning psychics. It'll be like done, cross it off the list. Whether people believe it or not or read it, that's you can only put the information out there and hope that they take it. But that is an example of how it's done. You got to get the content out there, whether you're doing it by YouTube or wherever you're doing it. But Wikipedia has very high standards and very strict rules. And this is just really a wonderful thing that Richard has been able to do. I'm very proud of him, and I'm really I think it's going to be a really nice thing. I can't wait till those citations get up on Wikipedia for the psychics.
Yeah, I know it's going to be fun for Dave and Ben. I don't know if you saw it, but Richard did a major survey of 3,000 odd predictions close to 4,000 predictions by psychics published in magazines, mainstream publications, about what's going to happen in the next year. For over 20 years, he's done it for 12 years, looking at predictions made in 20 years. And he found that the accuracy, the percentage of that were correct was 11%. Mm-hmm. And of course, 11% is not a very high number.
We're done. It's like, okay, we don't have to do this again.
No.
We're
done. That's worse than a dartboard.
Sorry?
That's worse than a dartboard.
We'll be able to point to this all the time. I mean, every time you'll be able to, anytime that you hear any kind of psychic or any of that sort, it'll be like, boom, you're done. That's here, right. Look, here it is. Here it is.
If my neurosurgeon was accurate 11% of the time, I think I'd feel the different. If all neurosurgeons were accurate 11% of the time, I think we're in trouble.
But that actually goes to the point of what I've learned, as I said, the narrative of how there's this alluring, the alluring gift of persuasive people, and I think I'd love to talk. Maybe we can talk more about that and why do people like cling on to these things. But we could probably we sort of know that. But I think that's true, right? The narrative is really powerful.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
But on that narrative idea, I mean, sort of is what used to be the case in media sort of 20, 30 years ago. I know I was there at the time. Is that format, that medium has changed. It's totally disappeared. I mean, none of you people are in that medium, right? I mean, Ben's online website, Dave does YouTube clips, and Susan through Wikipedia, etc. Is mainstream media as an avenue to present science and truth against pseudoscience dead? So, Susan, what do you think?
Well, we did a sting on Jeanette Wilson. Okay, COVID denier, supposedly, and so on. I did this long sting with the New Zealand Skeptics. Wonderful, wonderful sting. It was a lot of fun to do. And, I wrote, I could write it up. I could do an article about what we found and how she was, all the things she was doing, COVID take this medication that'll coat your lungs so you can't get COVID, all this other nonsense. But that wasn't enough. Susan Gerbic did a sting, and here's her evidence, but that wasn't enough. What I did is we went to the spinoff, and Susie actually got us, I think it was Susie, or no, somebody in the New Zealand Skeptics, and they got a reporter to do research on it. He interviewed her, he interviewed me, he did into research, and what he was able to do is, I had recorded her. I had played the part of being somebody who attended her event. I recorded her, and she normally doesn't record that section where she's talking about anti-vaccines. So what happened is the reporter, I sent the little video clip to him. And so when he interviewed her, he said, are you anti-vaccine? And she says, oh, no, of course not. I'm not anti-vaccine. And he goes, I just watched your workshop where you're talking about being anti-vaccine and all the things. She's like, what are you talking about? There's no way. So because normally what happens is you go to see one of her events, her husband turns off the camera when she gets to the anti-vaccine part, whatever the recording. But this time over Zoom, he didn't have that benefit. So I went to the media. The media just eviscerated her, just with facts. He interviewed her. He did all the work he had to do. And then all that information, guess where it ends up? Wikipedia. Because now we have secondary sources from journalistic integrity. So the media is our friend. The media is amazing if you, in some circumstances. So yes, I don't think it's dead. I love it. I think it's great. I still get a print newspaper delivered to my driveway every day.
Okay, Ben, you sort of reacted to that. What's your feeling? Do you get approached by media for information?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned before, our challenge is that facts are boring, and scientists, how they communicate isn't the greatest in terms of clickbait, right? So right now with Facebook and everything, the only time you get any sort of engagement or clicks is through extremes, like the extreme end of the spectrum. We're the complete opposite. We're sort of down the middle, evidence-based. So we have to work, or we have to try and work with other media partners. But we've tried over the years. We've got a couple. I mean, Science Alert, I don't know if you know Science Alert. They're very, they're a partner of ours, but they have to be science aligned and have their principles. And I know Fiona McDonald, who's really great. She's an editor. She's our CEO here in Australia. But we strategically choose where we want to be. I mean, now, Tim, we haven't been approached. I mean, Science Alert did, and a couple other science-based publications. But I think in general, when we want to have a journalist site on MetaFact too. So a journalist can sign up and actually have their own questions where they ask experts.
No.
We don't have the capacity or resources to do that right now. So if you want to join up, just go to MetaFact and help us, everyone.
Okay, thanks for the plug.
So you're back to the plug. But no, so we want to try and do that. So journalists can come in and maybe have an easier way to engage experts and just reshare, just repost stuff. Everything's open, and all experts, whatever they say, is all open there. And you can quote them, you can share the link, you can do whatever you want, like the conversation does. You know,
the comments you have up there. Well, the conversation is like 800 words for an article, right? I mean, sort of the comments you have on MetaFact are fairly short, right, by people, as opposed to. It's by design, so because it's a really hard to get anyone to spend 2 days on writing an article, or it may be sometimes more. I mean, I know young scientists who spend a week deliberating on their conversation article. So we want to actually be the opposite, whereby it's consensus, where you get many different experts sharing their own evidence or their own thoughts and opinions on one particular question, but it's very short for them, so because they're busy. So we sort of want to be the opposite end of that spectrum. Yeah. If I can ask a bit on that, I mean, in the world, as the audience as well, half the people writing the articles don't have the time to do a lot of research and writing, and also the readers in a TikTok world, right, don't necessarily have a lot of time to actually read long form things, as opposed to Dave, right, who spends long. There's one I saw which is 53 minutes on quantum mysticism, right? Which is quite
Big
extensive.
topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I
All
try
this
to go
stuff is.
deep with that one.
Well, I tell you, I watched one on physics and modern physics and quantum physics. I thought, wow, it's a long way from Vsauce and things like that, right? Which are sort of popular, in a way, edutainment, right? Now you are not.
Sure.
You sort of deny edutainment. Oh, no, for you personally, you do not do edutainment.
Yeah.
How do you do it? How do you write such long things? How long does it take you to write a podcast? Or a YouTube clip, sorry.
Well, see, that's very interesting. I mean, the majority of my content is just academic tutorials. So pretty much the polar opposite of edutainment. I guess the debunking content flirts with kind of an edutainment label, because I do try to make it kind of biting and a little bit funny, and the idea is it's not clickbait. I'm trying to get information across, but I don't know. I mean, everything has its purpose. There are great edutainment channels that sort of capture the imaginations and interests of people. I think it can get a little dangerous sometimes because not those who do it best. Those who do edutainment best are very thorough and fact-based, but there is edutainment out there that is overly reductive, and can give people a false sense of mastery of a subject or something like that. I can't tell you how many times I get linked to a perfectly reasonable, non-fraudulent edutainment channel saying, oh, gravity isn't real. See this video? No, this video doesn't say that. It doesn't say that at all. What are you talking about? People who just kind of, just watch a few seconds of something or just read the title because it's kind of a clickbait title. There's a lot of even articles out there. This is why everything we know in physics is wrong, or something like that, where it's, well, don't say that. Now people are going to say all of physics is wrong, and I don't ever have to learn any physics because this just told me that all of it is wrong. There's really a lot of danger with if science is reported that way. But you do have to go case by case. There's fantastic edutainment out there, but I definitely try to be more rigorous and less clickbaity.
Still funny.
Yeah.
I mean, it is Professor Dave explains, right? It is a sort of a humorous teacher. It's not quite a heavy TED talk, right? But it's sort of slightly different to that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the academic content is very straightforward and just here's what you need to know for class. But yeah, the debunking stuff, I get a little sassy, because I get passionate about it, because these are, this isn't just an opinion. This is look, these people are defrauding, they're lying to make money on the internet. And they're impacting public perception of science in a negative way that very directly leads to death. Most directly with anti-vaccine, COVID denial, things like that. So yeah, kind of get fired up about it. But yeah, I'm just sort of doing it the way I think it should be done and the way I like to do it. And I don't think too much beyond that.
Ben, looks like you were trying to say something there.
Oh yeah, just in terms of edutainment, I mean, I think there's both sides here. I'm so indebted. David Attenborough, for example, like that's the pinnacle of science. That's edutainment, I think, but he's just done so much for the natural world as an example. That's obviously through a different medium, but now you have YouTube, that's democratized, and there's a lot of different amazing people doing amazing things on YouTube. But then there's the opposite side. But even in the channels that are sort of under resourced, and there's one person that there's some big problems in there too, in the sense that if you're not willing to make errors and accept them and then say, okay, actually I made an error here or not, then that's a problem as well. One of the first ones we did on Metafact, my son was 8 and he said, he came to his class and said the teacher said, the Belcher sea snake, I can't remember what it was, Belcher sea snake's the most venomous snake in the world. And he came to me and said that, and I went, really, is that true? I'm not like a snake expert. I'm not a snake toxicologist. So we said, well, let's just do that on Metafact. Let's share that. So I shared that. And Brian Fry, who's one of the leading snake toxicologists at University of Queensland in the world, said that's completely false, actually. It's the inland taipan, blah, 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 blah. So he got that from YouTube. So he got that from a nature YouTuber who was actually huge. But so I guess but I still support that person. It's not like, oh, I'm gotcha. I don't really like that either. It's more around, and he was actually really receptive to that. But most people aren't receptive to that. They're very set in their ways, Tim, as you know, they're very dogmatic. I'm more appreciative of people who are more willing to be collaborative and go, look, what is the evidence?
Okay, well, let's get outside of collaborative for a second and let's get confrontational. Susan.
All right, let's
go. Your bête noire, right, is a lot of those psychics, right, that you've done stings on. Can you briefly describe what you've done, but why have you done it? Just, we've only got a short amount of time left, so if you'd be
okay. The reason why I'm doing that is because I hate people lying to people, especially people who are grieving. It's just, these grief vampires are just horrendous people, and I'd like to have them gone. But the reason why I'm doing it is because I'm trying to show our community we can do this, and we don't have to be experts. I'll show you how. We'll learn together. Let's see what we did right, what we did wrong, report back. That's why I'm doing it. I'm trying to get our community together and trying to make us more active. And it's just, I picked psychics.
Yeah. But I mean, so Susan, you're a professional troublemaker, right? I mean, so in a way.
Yeah.
But I mean, can every psychic, can every skeptic do that? Go out and, into a psychic meeting or something?
No, with some training and some motivation and some mentoring, of course. Yes, of course we can do it. There's a lot of things that people can do. Just showing up to a psychic event when we can go back in person and just having a good laugh every time they make a mistake. I mean, a huge belly laugh. They can't throw you out. That's activism right there by itself. But absolutely, people can be trained to do all kinds of things. They just need to know each other and get together with other like-minded people. I've worked with so many different groups all over the world: New Zealand skeptics, Australian skeptics, Las Vegas skeptics, people in the East Coast. Oh yeah, there's so many people out there who are just dying to do something. They're like, I want to do it. I want to be involved. I'm like, heck, let's put something on. Let's figure out something we can do that involves people.
Susan, can I ask a question to you? So how many times have you gone to someone and they've flipped? Like, what are some trend? Like, what are things you can actually do to flip someone's mind? Is there any, do you have any ideas or like thoughts? I've got some theories, but I'd love to hear what you think.
On psychics?
Oh, just generally speaking, when pseudoscience, psychics, whatever it may be. And Dave as well, to be honest. Sorry, Tim, I'm actually keen to understand.
But you're talking about the audience.
Yeah, I'm talking about someone. I mean, I'm from climate. I've had many climate deniers come up to me, and I think it's a losing. As Dave said, there's no 1% of the world. So or maybe it's more. I don't know what the 1%, but yeah, what do you do?
What I think is that we have to inoculate our population, and that's. I know it sounds vaccine related, but I've been saying this for years, way before we had a pandemic. You cannot expect people who already believe and are talking, think that they're communicating with the dead and paying people large sums of money to look at the work I do and just suddenly go, oh, it's a fake? You mean all that time I was talking to my son? It was not talking to my son? What you have to do is you have to introduce it in places like this and outside of this kind of community. Stop preaching to the choir, and you get people understanding that, so when they're in a desperate situation, when they're experiencing serious grief and they think maybe they should go to a psychic or for whatever reason, they go, wait a minute, I remember this talk somebody gave a long time ago, and I have a feeling that that's not quite kosher. You have to inoculate people. Same with climate change. Before they get to this point, we have to excite the youth. We have to push more people into science and love science. And we have to respect the people of science. And that's what we do with our project. It's all of those. But yes, you have to have an open mind, and you have to communicate people and make it a two-way street. I'm happy to listen to your argument about the flat earth, but you're going to have to listen to my argument why that's BS.
The issue there is like sort of my son is 21, but from the day one, I sort of always said, I don't care what you believe as long as you've asked questions to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. And one of the saddest days was when he came to me about 5, 6 or 7 or something. He said, there really isn't a Santa Claus, is there?
Oh.
I know. I break up and I think about it. He goes, no, sorry. And I had to explain why is there. And then he went, what about the Easter Bunny?
Yeah.
I had to go through a series of them. And when
That's
you say
young.
people,
No,
That's
all
young.
of them.
5, 6.
I know.
Right, all these
That's
years.
What about the Queen
my
of England?
God.
Is the Queen of England real?
we're not sure about that one. Um, Dave,
You like
you've
them.
had confrontations, I believe. Anyway, you've certainly
Oh,
covered
yeah.
a lot of flat earthers,
Daily.
right? Yeah, one after
Yeah.
the other of your clips is about flat earthers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Have you turned any flat earthers? Have you turned them round to a globe?
Yes, many, hundreds. Even some prominent ones. There's a flat earther. What is his name? Speak Truth. He has a channel called something like that. He used to post flat Earth videos, and then one day he posted a commentary on my video and said, "Whoops, I now believe that the Earth is a sphere," and he became a flat Earth debunking channel and stuff like that. But so, I mean, to piggyback on what we were talking about before, yes, I agree. On the long term, popularizing science, making scientists celebrities, things like that. This is great for public perception of science. But definitely in the short term, there's two ways to go about it. With something as ridiculous as flat Earth, with something that is so palpably incompatible with reality and observation, I think it suffices to just present the argument as best you can. So I have little videos that are 5 minutes long saying, proving the Earth isn't flat without using science. So, hey, the stars rotate this way in the northern hemisphere, they rotate the other way in the southern hemisphere. Whoopsie, it's not flat. Like stuff like that. Look at the moon, right? Or the sunset. Why does it stay the same size? And how can it's doing that? Just really basic logic, which is why we figured out the Earth was a sphere thousands of years ago, just by looking at things in the sky. So when you present them that simply and concretely, that's one way to get through. But then when it's more subtle, you're talking about psychics and communicating with the dead and things like that. That's more, you have to get more psychological with it. So with like the quantum mysticism debunk, I really try to get into the psychology of it, into the sociology of it, right? Here's the narrative that they're peddling you. This is the identity that they're selling you. This is why you want this to be true, because you want this identity to be yours. Or the romance of naturalism, and then let me give you some information for historical context, or let me define these words for you. You really have to go, I think I understand why you believe this very specifically. This is the rationale you are using, and this is how they are taking advantage of you, and I deconstruct it from there. So it's sort of two sides, because you can't always just explain sophomore year organic chemistry to people and have them go, yep, that makes sense. That there's sort of a division between what's feasible to explain to the layperson and what's kind of not. And quantum physics is obviously on the other side of that line. I'm not even equipped to do it myself. I'm not an expert in quantum physics or anything, but yeah, you try to get to the sociology of it. You try to say, these are the narratives, and this is why it's invalid.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that about, and all of you talk about turning people, if you like. If I can just throw to a couple of the questions that we've got, and we might come back to our own conversations, but this one is relevant. I think it's Graham, who's asking that he has a relative, and don't we all, who's an anti-vaxxer and a one world order believer who was told Graham that Wikipedia cannot be believed because they have rewritten or removed pages that could have been interpreted as providing some support for these theories. So in other words, there's a censorship in Wikipedia. Susan.
Well, this relative, I'm sorry to say, is probably too far beyond for anybody to show him a video and that will be enough. You're just going to have to love your relative, try to find a subject that you both agree on. I don't know, Bigfoot or something. Find something, define the terms. I mean, because words mean different things to different sides of the group. So you kind of got to come up with a common language and just love that person and tell them, I don't think it's healthy we have these conversations anymore, I guess. And then just talk about the weather or something, because you're not going to be able, when they're already down at the bottom of the rabbit hole, we're not getting them up easily. You have to get them before they get into that rabbit hole, I think. When they're part of the way in, okay, but not, you can't send a ladder or a rope after them and expect them to be able to pull themselves up. It's going to take way more than we have for a panel here to discuss that.
Sometimes you think when someone goes down the rabbit hole, it'd be just so nice just to bury them, fill it in, right?
We just say, I have a rope, I can send it if you need it. But in the meantime, I'm going to dinner,
But
sorry.
In the 15 seconds left, does Wikipedia remove pages that are sort of supportive of pseudoscience beliefs?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
We support them. No,
Okay, yep.
yeah, hell no.
Okay. The other thing was that there's another question which I'll quickly get to. Someone's suggesting how you actually talk to someone. This person's James says that his approach to arguing pseudoscience online was to consider the person. Sorry.
Stop arguing with people on the internet.
Well, that's what he was saying. He's given up arguing against that person as a lost cause, and then just sort of gives his argument for the people on the side. Right? There are
two or three people.
Well,
move on to something productive. They're
Well,
not. Move along.
And I think that's for me, I've had a long 20-year history in shifting that from, like, I had many climate deniers and it was not really useful in any way. So the last 10 has been really the bell in the middle. What are those reasonable people in the world, which are the majority, and they're Google searching right now. So let's just give them better trusted information.
Right.
That's where the big opportunity is shifting the bell, not those, the extremes.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is often said about skeptical meetings like this is that we're preaching to the converted, right, or talking to the choir. But
I need this.
Yeah, we all need this because what it does is share experiences and teach us how to then move out into the outside of the world with the skeptics. And there are the people who are the far believers, the relatives, the uncle you have. It was just a lost cause. So you won't convert them. You just don't try. You're just beating your head against the wall. It's the people in the middle, and I presume that's what Dave is sort of trying as well. I mean, do you? Yeah.
I also engage with all of the trolls. I do this in a way that no one else does. Everybody else I talk to is like, no, why would you engage with these people? I don't know. Maybe I'm a masochist or something, but I feel like some of them, if I just slam them in the head with facts over and over and over again, because they eventually have to go to sleep at night and reflect and reckon with what they've been spewing. And if it gets excessive, I just block, ignore. Obviously. But I get in the trenches. I get in the trenches and deal. Only on my channel. I don't go hunting for it. But people who come to my house and spew their rhetoric, I deal with them in a manner that I deem appropriate. So
do you tend to lose friends and not influence people and have awkward dinner meetings?
Oh, no, not like that. This is just people on YouTube,
Right,
faceless, nameless people, But I mean, I use definitely a lot more tact in person, but I've been known to ruffle people's feathers. I mean, if somebody starts talking about astrology or something, I'll try my best to keep my mouth shut. But if someone asks me a question, I will tell you very matter-of-factly what I know, not what I think, but what I know and how you are wrong. And I've been getting more and more polite and friendly at that over the years. But I don't mince words. I don't entertain people's delusions.
From that point of view, we're probably at the end of our time actually, but I think make some references. For those who haven't seen it, go and listen to Tim Minchin's song "Storm" or the clip, and it's an excellent thing about a dinner meeting, if you like, and how you actually cope with that as a skeptic. For the others, go watch Professor Dave Explains. Go look at metafact, and that should be a verb. I want to metafact that now, right? and go read Wikipedia, right? And for all of you,
the 1900 pages we've written.
Yes, and be one of the 100 million viewers, and take it up to 103 million. Okay. Yeah. I'd just like to say thank you very much, all of you, actually, for your participation. I found it very stimulating.
A lot of fun.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
I'll pass you back to our MCs, if I can do that. Thank
you, Tim. And thank you, everyone, for a really interesting panel, really engaging and very useful.